Greetings, Guardians. My name is Bife here. Really quickly, today I have an interview with Alison Lurs, who is the narrative director of Destiny 2. This was a really exciting chat. We got to sit down and talk about a bunch of different topics. The first 20 or so minutes of the video are a spoiler-free section, and following up from that there is a spoiler warning, and we start to get into some questions that revolve around story spoilers. So, yeah, if you have any of those qualms with regards to things, don't worry, we front-loaded it for you, so you can turn the video off when the time is right. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and let this thing roll. Thank you very much, and enjoy the video. Alison, thank you so much for taking the time to join me here, and for agreeing to answer the questions. I know you have a really, really busy day over at Bungie, so thank you so much for taking all of this time, and congratulations for the reception on the narrative of Edge of Fate. It really is incredible.
Thank you so much. Bife, my friend, I will always make time for you. Thank you so much for having me.
No, seriously, the pleasure is all mine. With questions in mind, though, because I don't want to waste any of our time here. Like, this is a very precious commodity at this moment in time. I wanted to let you know, I've broken things down into some spoiler-free questions and then some spoiler-filled questions. So we'll get through the spoiler-free ones first, and then after that, I'm going to hit you with all of the deep lore questions, with all of the nonsense that we saw in Edge of Fate, which I'm so excited for, but some housekeeping first. First of all, I think it's fair to say the consensus about Edge of Fate's narrative is that it was received really well, but there might still be some people wondering if they should pick up the expansion. With as few spoilers and as many words or as few words as you want, what's your elevator pitch to those players about the story and why they might enjoy it and why they might want to pick Edge of Fate up again?
Yeah, so we designed this story to not necessarily be like an entry point, but if you haven't played in a while, we wrote it in such a way that you can just pick it up and not feel like you're going to get left behind. As for like what's going to happen once you get in there, we wanted to set up the next several years of Destiny's story with an ending in mind. We know where we're going. We know how we want to get there. We have like a loose plan of how we want to shape this story over the next few years. And what you experience in the Edge of Fate is going to be like not just setting up that journey, but like pouring gasoline on it and lighting it on fire and shoving it off a roller coaster. We talk about things that Destiny hasn't really talked about before. We get to meet some cosmic beings, and those cosmic beings interact with us in ways that you are not going to be able to anticipate. We wanted this to be a mystery that the player gets to feel smart unraveling.
I'm
and
so
that's where
mad
the spoilers start. So yeah.
I'm so mad that I made this a spoiler-free question
I
because
know.
having played it to the end, yeah, there's so much I relate to with that answer. God damn it. Okay.
Yeah, no, anything else gets me in trouble, so.
Yeah, no, and we're not in the spoiler section, so we'll move swiftly on, and I'll just stop with the beaming smile on my face. Okay, so you talked about something on the Edge of Fate reveal streams, which is about the nature of this new saga, and I think you kind of touched on it a little bit in the answer there, which is basically that just you on the narrative team, all the team members and the game directors, you're all well aware of the plan for the expansions, the story, the end point of the saga, generally speaking. This is not necessarily a thing of how far into the future does that reach, because I saw recently Robbie Stevens spoke with Milo, aka Roffle Waffles, and talked about this exact same point. But if we're talking about a journey of a few steps, how long do you reckon that it's going to take us to get to that narrative midpoint, I suppose? How long is it until the full table is set and we've got all of the different pieces in play, and then it's like, okay, just the game of moves from here on out? Do we have long to wait for that, or are there still pieces that you need to set up? I guess that's the easiest way to put it.
Oh, there are still plenty of pieces left to set up. I think the easiest way to answer without giving specific dates or getting people excited about, whoa, it's this specific amount of time. We haven't started working on the midpoint yet, if that helps. There's still plenty to get on the table, like plenty to get ready. This is very much the beginning of a journey, far away from the midpoint, definitely far away from the ending. We really wanted this to kind of be like, this is the table setting, and we're going to be putting some meat on the table over the next couple of expansions.
Gotcha. It's honestly like that little bit is, I think, very important for the sake of scale and understanding.
Yeah.
There's so many different moving parts and pieces if you look at Destiny's previous saga, and eventually a lot of them come together and culminate in what was the final shape and everything that led up to that point. But setting the table, I think it's fair to say it took years. And there's some things to be said about the kind of nature of the development of Destiny's original iteration and how that kind of meant the first few years, unfortunately, had to be a bit of a reconstruction of things. But it also gives me a lot of confidence with regards to what you just said there, because again, the scale of something that is not quite fully there, and yet already everyone is completely salivating over the narrative for it, that gives me a lot of confidence about the nature of things building up. So that's really good to hear.
Yeah, and this also is a kind of a good opportunity to talk about kind of our methodology for how we approach long-term storytelling.
Please, go right ahead. Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, I've talked about this technique before, but one method of long-term storytelling that I've used a lot in the past is something that I call the fridge. This is how I was trained to tell long-form storytelling, like as you're going, like making it up as you go. But the idea of the fridge is that when you're telling a story, you're kind of stocking a refrigerator with ingredients. So if I'm telling you a story about a man who went to the bank, and on his way to the bank, he saw a Dalmatian cross the street, and he was so distracted that somebody ran into him and stole his bag. We can look at that little tiny story I just told you and go, okay, our ingredients are bank, man, Dalmatian, bag, mugging. And those things we can put inside of our storytelling fridge. And as we're telling our story and we're making things up as we go, if we get stuck or if we are looking for a connection to make, we can open up that fridge and see what ingredients are in there, pull them out, and make sandwiches. Like, okay, so we know that we've got the Dalmatian from earlier. We know that we've got the guy who was stealing things. What if those two things were connected? And that's a great way to tell a story that awards the audience for paying attention and also makes you look like a genius because you're just listening to your past self as you're telling the story. Storytelling is listening in the end. It's listening to what you have already said. It's listening to what your audience wants to hear. I love using the fridge as a device for long-term storytelling because you're constantly taking things from it and also filling it back up. So you never run out of ideas, you never run out of ingredients, and there's always some way to make it feel like it's connected to something that happened earlier. This is a technique you can see us use a lot in The Edge of Fate.
Yeah.
In the first third, it may feel kind of slow if you're slow in the sense of like the plot sets itself up by putting a bunch of stuff in the fridge. We're establishing a lot of proper nouns. We're establishing a lot of ideas. We're throwing out a lot of those ingredients. And then over the back 2/3, it's just making sandwiches all over the place, connecting ideas, like tying two things together and allowing space for the player to feel smart by observing and paying attention and then feeling rewarded for paying attention without us ever talking down to you and just explaining what's going on.
It makes me furious that that this is part of a no spoilers section to the video because, but you can immediately see that approach with so many of the different elements of the plot of Edge of Fate, and it's just sitting there and understanding that methodology is actually really exciting because it also, at least for me, as someone who's been covering the lore of this game for a significant amount of time, I think about how many ingredients there are in the fridge. I know you've talked about this I know you've talked about this with Milo before. Again, Mr. Ruffle Waffles. I love that name. It's so good. But
every time I say it, I smile. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But the the point of me bringing that up is that I'm excited for him, but also excited for other players who might just be jumping in with Edge of Fate, either as returning or new players, when they realize just how deep the stock of ingredients in the fridge really is. I mean,
totally.
I will happily sit here and mention this because I don't think it represents spoilers and it certainly doesn't come up in Edge of Fate. But when you have a game like Destiny that has everything between, obscure astral predators like the Aphelion or the Aphelion, I don't remember exactly what the pronunciation is. And, you have all of that scaling from that strange, obscure end of things to lore that is dropped in Edge of Fate, which I think from the previews, it's fair to say, some of it leans into the old past of Earth before the Golden Age. And those two things exist in the same universe, and there's a breadth of mad, wild stuff in between it. The idea of reaching back into the fridge and finding something novel to connect it all, it makes me really excited because, those connections absolutely exist and they're representative of some of the most exciting pieces of lore in the entire franchise. And I'm just super thrilled that that's going to be the approach going forward. And that's how you guys are looking at building the stories.
And The other kind of half of it too is making sure that those ingredients that we're pulling all also still feel Destiny at the same time. Something I talk with the team with a lot about is the idea of sticking to our principles, like sticking to the principles of what makes Destiny Destiny. In my time before I came to Bungie, I worked on Dungeons and Dragons, I worked on Magic the Gathering, and something I learned working on both of those properties is that IPs are more flexible than we think they are, as long as you are making sure that what is core and foundational to those stories are still true. Like, so long as like X is true, you can do Y, as long as you're not breaking the thing that was established before. And so when we think about Destiny, we can think about several principles that are always true about the stories that we tell. There's always a sense of optimism when we talk about the future. And so if the future is always with the sense of optimism and hope that we're working towards something, we should look at the past in the same way. We can take those principles and apply them to not just like events in the story, but character as well. So as we're filling up our fridge and we're adding ingredients to it, making sure that all of those ingredients are kind of like in the same family, that they're all going to blend together, and then throwing in a little bit of spice every now and then keeps things feeling fresh, while also feeling true to the story that we're trying to tell.
Absolutely. I promise for this next question, this is the last time I'll bring him up, but I mean, I'm a huge fan of the fact that he's jumped into Destiny and is a huge fan of narrative things. In a previous interview with Milo, you talked about questions that the Destiny community isn't necessarily asking about the game right now, and narrative topics that haven't necessarily been approached. And again, this is the no spoilers section, but now that Edge of Fate has released and we've got a whole saga ahead of us, what are some of the things you might want to start to prime us to think about that fall vaguely towards that category? And, just to give an example, I'm not going to sit there and say, hey, Renegades is coming up. Think of how a lightsaber would be constructed in Destiny. No, we're not talking about that. Instead, to give an example from the previous saga, if this was ahead of the Beyond Light era and the beginning of us as Guardians wielding darkness, this might be the moment where you might want to prime us to think about the nature of power, corruption, whether something is or isn't actually evil, and what it takes to sort of cross that line and still remain true to who you are. So with that framing in mind, is there a way of you asking us to sit there and think about what that sort of set of questions might be for the Fate saga? And again, that's a very complex question, but what themes would you like everyone to sort of start priming ourselves to think about, I guess?
Oh man, my first response was going to be, I plead the fifth. There's no way I can answer this without giving anything away. But thinking more in terms of like thematic, like things that we want to look forward to, I think we can point back to the principles I was talking about of Destiny. Destiny is a story of cosmic questions, of what is our place in the universe? How does the universe move around us? We are so small, and we occupy a space that is so large. What happens among those celestial bodies is stuff that we're not always a part of, and yet we are at the same time. That notion of big cosmic questions paired with Destiny's other big principle of identity. Who am I? What's my purpose in this world? What am I here for? What was I put here to do? And also, can I change who I am and what I'm set out to do? Those two corners of Destiny's foundational principles are the ones that we're going to be poking at, I think. That's the best answer I can come up with off the top of my head.
Excellent. I mean, hey, considering the nature of the question, the fact that I don't want to sit there and immediately be like, please
doozy.
Tell us about the next 5 years of Destiny. No, like
Hey, so I've got this PowerPoint presentation. Can you fill out each slide? Thank you.
Indeed. Fill us all with the requisite information, and we'll figure it all out from there, right? So, last couple of questions from this particular section. There is some new technology for storytelling in the game, which has been shown off in Edge of Fate. In particular, I want to go ahead and say that I love the fact that we have now got the hologram calls from characters, which you can then also just send to your comms if you want to keep moving while you hear the message. And there's also, of course,
we lovingly refer to those as ghost phones. That's what we call them on our end.
Excellent. So we've got the ghost phones, and then we've also got the interesting dialogue or text boxes that you get with data pads or NPCs. And, just to go on a really quick tangent with this, absolutely love that this is different from dialogue that gets deposited into a vendor screen, because it puts the player in a different frame of mind. In those instances, it's all about, like, get through this so you can get to your engrams. In the other instances with your new dialogue boxes, it's all about this is where you find the story, find the details, read something in a quick snippet that lets you attach to a story. And I love that because it's a new way of telling and delivering the narrative, which is very important, I think, for a live service game, because delivering a narrative in this manner is something that requires a lot of kind of freshness. You need new avenues for delivery every once in a while so that you can actually keep the story delivery itself feeling fresh. It's not just about new stories. I think it's also about expanding the ways we can tell those stories. So with that in mind, are there other avenues for delivering narrative in a technical or just in a, pure, hey, we're going to tell a story in this very broad, different manner kind of sense that the team is working on? How are you thinking about how you deliver your narrative going forward?
Our next step is going to be going deep on those narrative text boxes. We love how they work. I love them because they are a device that the average player is really familiar with. You've used them and encountered them in 1,000 other games that you've played. You already understand the kind of sandbox of content that they can deliver and how they work. So there isn't much of a teaching element to it. We don't have to teach you how to use these things. You already know how to use it because you've been playing these kinds of games since you were 8 years old. Right? We want to use more of those narrative text boxes throughout. Fans clearly love them. We love them because they're really easy to set up. They don't require the same amount of resources that, say, recording dialogue and then translating it into many different languages does. It allows us to be nimble and to add different ways of interacting with characters that we wouldn't have had access to otherwise. And when we get to the spoilery part, we can get more into how we use that with characters and the Edge of Fate. But as for the future, I see us building on that system, and I see us continuing to find ways to maximize it and make it feel good. Obviously can't go in too deep into what we plan on doing in the future as far as narrative technology, but suffice to say, we're close partners with our friends over on that part of our studio who are experts in narrative delivery, narrative systems, and we're going to keep playing with our narrative systems too a lot over the next few years. So rather than strictly just narrative delivery, I think how we tell stories is something that we're also going to be playing with too.
Okay, gotcha. I mean, we can jump on into that in the spoilers section in just a second, because this last question is really a very small one, and it only bugs me because I've been wondering about it since I saw it release. This is a question for our hand cannon users. There is a new hand cannon that drops. Is it agape or agape? It's agape, right?
Agape.
Agape.
Yes.
Agape.
Unconditional love, yes.
Yeah, oh, okay. That's a pronunciation difference. Agape on the British side of things, maybe? Or have I heard that?
I think it's a
Have
thing,
I been saying that wrong my whole life? I don't know.
I probably have too. My mother is British, so I usually get to be the translator at the office for no, this is why our voice actor is saying it this way. Because it's an accent thing.
Yep. I fear I may have garbled that my entire life, but you know what? I'm going to keep on going. Agape.
I got you. Agape.
But yes, I thought it was based on the
love the tab on that one,
attached.
by the way.
Yes. Yes. I read it through this morning, and I won't say much more, but it's very appropriate that it is indeed agape as opposed to agape.
Agape.
Yeah, it's been bugging me ever since it's going on, because I thought, no, that's not it.
Nope.
Surely that's not it.
Nope. It's definitely not it.
Anyway, spoilers section. And before we go ahead and start on anything, let's go ahead and readdress that question with regards to narrative technology, now that we can go ahead and firmly say that if you are not looking for spoilers on the Edge of Fate and you want to go ahead and play it for yourself, turn off the video now, come back to it later. But again, you were saying...
I love the Ionians. I love them. I love that they work because of narrative text boxes. We knew that we were going to be getting this technology for this release, and it was kind of the factor that led us to go, yeah, no, we should be exploring the people who live here more, and this is a way that we can pull it off. It's such a flexible tool because it allows us to not just talk to them as one-on-one dialogue, but we also get that moment before we get the translator of getting to have a little bit of prose that tells us physically how they're interacting with us, how they're moving, what their gestures are. This tool is so flexible, and it really was the thing that allowed us to kind of get to know this group of people better in a way that we wouldn't have had the resources to otherwise.
It distinctly reminds me of this is not a thing even closely connected to the Destiny franchise, but there is a game that I think does something very similar to a great effect, which is 40k game, which follows the Adeptus Mechanicus, and it is almost the exact same thing. It's something that made me smile when I first played it, because one of the reasons they went ahead and did this technique, which is they'll have the text of what's being said in the text box, but then they will have the kind of like somewhat similar to what the Ionians are doing, but it's much more of a vox garble to it. And, it helps for one, because you can still have what the Ionians have as well, which is this really interesting narrative vocal performance, which is their own language, which you can still discern some words in it. Like, you can determine a few names in there when they say them, but it is its own thing, and it doesn't necessarily require localization on the audio side of things instead of just the text side. So I don't know, I saw that and I absolutely was reminded of it. I absolutely smiled because in both instances, I think it's executed really, really well.
Yeah, I remember the first time we were playing through and listening to the audio after it had been put in. And I remember jumping when I recognized one of them say, Rebecca. And I was like, oh God, wow. They recorded it. They actually did it. Our audio team is spectacular. Our dialogue team, our audio folks, it is such a pleasure to work with artists like they are. They did such a magnificent job with the Ionians. I could listen to him talk all day. It's a beautiful blend of Basque and theremin at the same time, as Lodi puts it.
Indeed. Okay, so starting on the main questions I had in this kind of spoiler section, are there any future plans for side quest content to be more reactive to the player's progress? So this question comes from some campaign experience that I've had, and I've seen a few other players talk about, which is that some of the content that you get, it kind of doesn't really matter what moment in time you get to it. And in other instances, progressively, the side quests kind of retread plot points that have already been resolved if you don't do them immediately. So it's almost like they sort of go out of date, so to speak, if that's an analogy that makes sense. Are there any sort of learnings and lessons from that, and just the ability to sort of change up side quest content? Is that kind of possible? I mean, obviously it's 2 times the work on a single side quest, but how are we looking at implementing these in the future, basically?
Yeah, this is a priority for us. It's one of those things that I wish we were able to tweak in time before we were able to get it out to the public. Making sure that our narrative delivery is matching like where you're at, what you're experiencing, integrating that more into the experience is a huge learning for us. And that's something that we're going to be taking forward as we go into the next couple of expansions. That narrative system is something that we learned a lot from. This was our first time ever doing it. And I think we've taken away a lot of learnings as to like what feels good for the player, when we interrupt versus when we allow you to just kind of discover something on your own, as well as on the design side. How does delivery of these make the most sense? What does the experience itself feel like? This was our first time taking a really big swing of trying a new kind of quest. And like you said, like there's been a lot of learnings that we've taken away from it. Everything that you've described absolutely makes sense, and we run into the same thing. I know that we want to build on this system in the future and improve upon it.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I think for a first outing, you do get some really fantastic side quests in there, and I think it absolutely delivers on the possibility of these, which is focusing down on a single part of the narrative and how it kind of affects a certain small subset of the world, whether it's a quest that is specifically tied to Lodi and whether we could trust him, whether it's something to do with dark matter and what's happening here on Kepler and how it might be affecting the Vex. All of these are cool little topics that get explored, and I think that that's a real credit to the system, is just the ability to go in this sort of micro mode where all of a sudden you can take a fine-toothed comb to just one topic in particular and understand it, not just on the level of, okay, this is what's happening, but also this is how characters are reacting to it, you know? You throw Ikora into a quest at the heart of it, and it's just, you get her perspective as a member of the Hidden and someone who's been an agent, and then maybe Maya comes in, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, this is the Overlord's perspective. You know, it's great. Love it.
Yes. We see a ton of promise in these, especially since in the past, our narrative delivery has been exclusively through missions. And trying to tell a story through a mission is very difficult because you're also trying to focus on whatever the action is at the time. We don't want to distract while you're facing down a combatant. We don't want to get too in your face while you're trying to sort out a puzzle. There's very limited space and time inside of a mission. And so usually we would be trying to squeeze in also like, hey, you need need to go press this lever, but also here's the big melodrama that's going on right now that we need to deal with, the big emotional stakes and the big relationship stakes. Having all of that kind of crammed in can be very cloying. And so these side quests allow us to give space to those characters and space to those relationships. My hope is that we can better integrate those side quests into the act structure itself, so that it feels like something that organically slides in alongside what you're doing, rather than I have to wait for it at the very end, or there's just no time for any of this, I gotta pick it up at the very end of the quest when these feel kind of out of place. My hope is to try and get these a lot more part of the experience, because they enhance it so much once they're in there.
I completely agree, and I think that the actual integration of them is going to be I think it's totally the right point to focus on. Speaking of someone who does this game and, plays it for a living alongside making content on it, I speak from a very, not the majority position, I suppose is the way I'd put it. I'm struggling for the words to find it, but you get my idea. Content creators, we may spend hours a day making our content, but a lot of the time that also means we're spending hours a day on stream actually playing the game for people, right? So from my perspective, I'm looking at this as well and thinking, I love that I'm getting all of this lore delivery, but there is another part of me that is pulling me in a different direction and saying, this is great, but I would love it if this was something that was integrated into my preparation for the raid, things like that. I think also it's not just for people in my position where I'm all the way up the sort of like food chain as far as like how much time I can spend on the game is concerned. I think it's also really cool when that gets integrated with the reward structure that makes sense for just players who are enjoying the world. But yeah,
I completely agree, because then too, it's reinforcing the kind of behavior that gets you more invested in the game. If you are being rewarded for engaging with the narrative, that's a win for everybody. You're getting more of the story and you're progressing further as you play. I think there's a way to make both of those things happen at once. It's something I'm very interested in too.
100%. I'm glad that that's a focus going forward. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and give a secondary spoiler warning here, because this is where we get into really big questions and really big spoilers, but also I understand that some of these moments are most definitely potentially questions where you might rightly want to sit there and say, we're going to leave that mystery on the shelf for you guys to discover at a later date. So
you got it.
Last warning for those of you who are watching, this is really big spoilers. So, starting off, has the death of 3 had any impact on Earth? We know that each of the 9 is bound to the gravity of one of the celestial bodies of the system, and 3, who is the giver, who is also very dead by the end of the campaign, they were tied to Earth. Has their death had any impact on Earth itself?
Yes. The Renegades is going to go into it, but I want to frame this in, we are dealing with gigantic beings, right? Like these are the embodiment of planets, and they move at a different scale and speed than we might. Looking too at the timeline of events, the timeline of the murder itself, we put in a bunch of hints throughout so the player can figure out when it happened, like when this took place. And you can piece together like the moment when Orin quit, the moment when Lodi arrives, and I think he marks it as like 3 or 4 weeks prior to when the Guardian shows up. It's been about a month or so since 3 was killed. We aren't going to see gigantic changes immediately. We also aren't going to see like everything like burst into flames and like fall apart and like volcanoes everywhere. It's the 9, right? So it's going to be a little different. It's going to be subtle. It's going to be something that's more creeping dread in the background than it is gigantic visible changes. But we want to get across that feeling of this was an unnatural death. This was not something that was supposed to happen. And so we're over the next couple of expansions, we're going to see that impact.
Yes, which I think is well appropriate considering, the way that Lodi describes it at the very end of like us as 3-dimensional beings being put into 2 dimensions. It's hard for us to comprehend what the 4th dimension will end up being because we don't see it, but to see the result of a being dragged into all of this and to see them crushed like this in some manner, it's telling. And
it's an awful death. The way that we described it when we were kind of figuring out like how does this work is it's kind of like when you take a deep sea fish and take them all the way up to the surface, they sort of explode. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Like they're not supposed to be up here. We saw this as kind of the same way. What Maya did with her commanding in a tantrum that 3 like be dragged into this dimension because it couldn't do what she wanted them to do. That expulsion, that unnatural unraveling, leaving this like newly formed body that shouldn't exist. The unnaturalness is something that we're excited to explore.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Speaking of the moments at the end of the campaign, we did have that moment where the Drifter did the greatest dunk to end all dunks and showed every Gambit player this is how you do it.
He did. He banked that moat.
He absolutely banked every single moat. And in that moment, as he's kind of approaching the singularity, it looks as though he is aging, which is also commented again in a data pad that's found in some of the strikes. However, at the end of the campaign, he also states that he is, quote, 9-touched when he kind of refers to himself. Is that one and the same? Is being 9-touched a little different? What's going on there?
Oh, he's a silver fox now, baby. I jokingly referred to it a couple months ago with a group of, by the end of Edge of Fate, 2 of our characters will get different haircuts for very different reasons. The Drifter, what he encountered was waves of like chronological, like he got too close to one of these beings that exists outside of the 4th dimension. Like he was able to get too close to this situation, and it has changed him. That hair isn't going anywhere. He looks like that now. His encounter with the 9 is going to stick with him in a very real way. He has seen firsthand that we're just pawns in this great big game. And I think that twinge of nihilism is kind of symbolized in the fact that he now looks like the old man that he very much is.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. I also know I keep on going on about 3, but I think it's one of the most fantastic reveals of the entire thing.
Three's a whole lot of fun. I love 3.
Yeah, 3 is just great. Speaking of which, their death is reflected, I think, as a strangely poignant moment throughout the entire story. But I really love it because the words that are immediately spoken when 3 is briefly brought back to life to deliver its message, the first thing they say is, "You're here so that I wouldn't die alone again, and still I'm afraid of dying," effectively, right? And I love that because it is an inversion of that trope where old Entrich beings, the old gods, they're unknowable and inconceivable, but the first thing that is said by one of the 9, a planetary body that exists, or planetary mind rather, that exists in the 4th dimension and is tied in through dark matter and gravity itself. It's one of the most human things you could possibly say is just, I don't want to be alone. I'm really afraid of dying. Right? And I wanted to dig in on that trope because I wanted to...
I would love to.
I really was so fascinated because I felt it was so effective, not just for 3's character arc, but also as a moment to demonstrate the commonality between a lot of beings in Destiny. But I wanted to go ahead and get your take on things. And I wanted to also ask, what made you guys choose to invert that particular trope? Because I think it definitely works in an incredible fashion, but I wanted to get your take on the thought process that led you there.
Yeah. In storytelling, what a character tells us about something else tells us who they are. And it's easy for an eldritch being to be a big hero who isn't afraid of anything, right? Like it's easy for them to be like, oh, like this is clearly the biggest, baddest thing out there. It's not going to be scared of anything. But the fact that if we play that game of allowing a character like that to be afraid of something, it makes that something that much more terrifying. And I think it works for 3 specifically. Like 3 is Earth. 3 as a character has never been alone. 3 exists because of sapiency. 3 exists because a human decided to help another human with a broken foot come join the rest of the tribe. It exists because a human decided to pet a dog and to care for their uncle and to do these very human things. 3 has never been alone. 3 has always had us. And at the end of its life, it was alone and dragged into a place it should not exist. I can't imagine a more terrifying death. And because this is a being that exists outside of our dimension, since it's in the fourth dimension, it sees the entirety of time. They know how things end. They saw their own death. And because they saw their own death and saw how lonesome and terrifying that was, they were able to set into motion a series of events so that when the moment came, it wouldn't be their last. There was still one thing that they would need to say. And so that's what they manufactured by bringing us here, by bringing Lodi here, by bringing the hall here, by setting all of that up into motion. I find 3 to be a very tragic character because they are not human. Catastrophic intervention is how they interact with the world. If they're thirsty, they divert a river. But at the same time, they genuinely care about their children. And I think that is how they see humans and the other beings that live on them.
And I think that your point there about how they need to be capable of drinking, etc., and therefore they divert a river. Again, a commentary made by someone in a side quest, if I'm not mistaken, as well, with regards to Orin's ghost Gol and how the Nine interacted with it, and the crazy extent to which they went in the lore to make sure that it wasn't there anymore.
Yes.
It's reflected in a lot of the actions of 3, but I absolutely adore the way that leads into the character side of things, because at first you approach 3 and you think of them in the very first act of the story, and you're like, wow, this unknowable entity, it's kind of scary, but like it's hard to form an opinion of something that's just so unknowable. And then you get to Ikora's cutscene and 3 deliberately just sending a train through to kill her former self, and you're like, wow, 3 is a villain, 3 is evil. And then you get to the very end where not only do you have that sympathetic line of I don't want to die alone, but also the knowledge that all of this was done specifically so they could give humanity a chance. It makes them such a brilliantly complex character, and it lends so much emotional depth. I absolutely adore that. Kudos on that front to everyone involved.
Thank you. 3 is not human, but 3 is the 9 are the most alien beings within Destiny. At the same time, I think we need to allow them the grace of having character and of being able to make their own choices and see the world in their own distinct way. What 3 values and how they approach the world is extremely different from how 9 approaches the world, from how 6 approaches the world. Each of them has their own wants and desires and feelings, and I don't think any of the others other than 3 would have done this. 3 cares so much about the people of Earth. That's why they were the ones to make this choice.
Indeed. Moving on as well, Lodi. I've got to talk about Lodi. He's a phenomenal character.
My son, my child, I love him. We have been standing this guy for a year, and I'm so happy we can finally talk about him. For the last 8 months, whenever I've had someone ask me, who's your favorite character in Destiny? I've gotten to very coyly say, you haven't met him yet. And it's, he is such a delight. I'm so happy that people are enjoying him.
Indeed. And shout out to Brian Villalobos for the incredible delivery as well.
He is astounding. Brian is such a dream to work with, such a grounded actor, and that was the reason why we cast him. Lodi as a character is so heightened. On the page, it is a very kind of insane combination, right, of characteristics. We needed to have a voice that would ground him and keep him with 2 feet on the ground as much as possible. Otherwise, he would sound like a joke. And Brian does such an amazing, amazing, amazing job of bringing such humanity to that character.
Yes, I think also they are fantastic, not just because they are well written, they fit into the story really brilliantly, and they've been deployed seemingly at the perfect place and perfect time, but also because of the way that impacts the actual players too. And I think that works particularly because of the fish out of water nature that Lodi has, where they are learning about all of this stuff for the first time. And in this sense, they make this kind of enigma as being the perfect introductory character who has the same questions as a new, potentially some returning players as well, and who then answers those questions with the knowledge they get and then reacts to those answers with, possibly the most human reactions of all.
Yeah.
The reason I bring that up, though, is because it is such a great guide for new players in their first big experience in the Destiny world. I almost wonder how the narrative team is going to keep doing that as expansions keep going forward. because obviously I think it's most important and entirely appropriate that at the beginning of a new saga you have a character like this deployed. You know, it helps with familiarity. It ensures that those players are able to jump on that journey for the same at the same time as everyone else and actually have the same level of context that everyone else does. But my question is, how do you do that going forward in future expansions? Because Lodi, as astounding as they are, they feel like the kind of phenomenon that can only really happen once every however many years. Because if you keep doing something like this over and over again, it becomes a repeated sort of thing, and then it loses a lot of its magic. So I guess I guess my question really boils down to, we had Lodi for Edge of Fate, but going forward into the rest of the Fate saga, what are we going to be doing in order to help new players navigate into the world of Destiny? And it's a very broad question, doesn't have to be based around just a character, but I'd love to get your take on this.
Yeah, so we can see it in action, actually. Lodi is not in every scene in The Edge of Fate. He is in, I believe, like half of the main areas that we go to explore. He's in a bunch of the cutscenes, obviously. But everything else, we were faced with the challenge of making sure that we're getting players on board without giving them a gigantic, like, annoying lore dump, or by just, like, plowing ahead and just going, okay, keep up, loser. Like, we're gonna keep the story going. I think that the way that we do it is in our approach. And a principle that we have on the narrative team is to reward the player for paying attention, but not punish them if they don't know something. And we can see that in action through organic conversation. There's some times where Orin, say, doesn't know what happened to Maya and the conductor and all that. And Ikora gets to explain through organic questions, who Maya is, what she did, what happened there, without just like ramrodding over the player and going like, okay, well, we're just going to assume that you played this whole thing and then tell the story. At the same time, we also want to reward the patience of the player who did play all of that and not make them feel like, ugh, okay, I have to listen to a really obnoxious lore dump. And so the way to do it is just to make it part of organic conversation, part of whatever the activity is that you're doing. As long as we're holding those two principles in mind, as we're reading through our scripts and our missions, we're asking ourselves, okay, am I inviting the player along on this information? Or am I running over them? Or am I leaving them in the dirt? And so our goal for each mission that we do, anytime that we're introducing new information, we're doing our best to prioritize making sure that nobody feels left behind, and also that we're introducing information in a way that feels natural and organic, rather than it's time for me to give you a lore dump on everything that's happening. As long as we keep those principles in mind, we can use that as a measuring stick for how successful we are in conveying information in a way that feels natural. Lodi is very helpful. We'll definitely be using him again, but also he's going to get to know things that our characters don't, and that will be a way of conveying information too.
Indeed. And especially not just because of the fact that he's got that link to the Nine naturally, now that he is indeed the emissary, but also he has a perspective that no one else does of the pre-Golden Age, you know, of the 20th century, which, I mean, in itself is going to be so funny because there are some bits of Destiny where, I mean, you know, Eris Morn and cooking with pineapples, for example, you know, she'll look at that and be like, what do you mean a pineapple? That's a made-up fruit, surely. And then, you know, you can have, you know, that's a very nebulous and not very impactful example, but, you know, it gives you the perfect idea of what's going on there. The moment that, I don't know if this is going to be the case, but there's a lot of lore about old Chicago, and if ever we go there in the future, Lodi's take on old Chicago is going to be incredibly important for obvious reasons. And it's, stuff like that I think is also really exciting.
Yeah, one of my favorite qualities of Lodi as a character, Destiny is so full of scientists. We're kind of packed full of scientists. We got enough scientists. Like, we have enough people involved in the hard sciences. But what we were lacking was someone from the humanities. And Lodi is the king of the humanities. Lewis Yarrow was a linguist. He studied people and how people work and what people care about. He lived among culture, and he knows so many things that were lost in the collapse. What I love about him as a character is he's kind of this breath of fresh air who gets to reintroduce all of these elements that are insanely human to the rest of the world. And at the same time, our king of humanities is stuck in a job that is trying to actively take that away from him. The more that he becomes the emissary, the less human he is going to be. And that will be the friction that the character gets to wrestle with.
I don't want to go too deep into it because we're starting to run out of time, but in particular, there's the lore tab for the new Hunter exotic, which I think goes into this very idea of him trying to hold on to the memory of everything that is no longer there. And it's it's a beautiful lore tab. It's a beautiful thing. It's the strangest thing as well to say that, because it starts with a list, and you know it just is wonderful to sit there and see a character like that has a connection to something that we see as very normal, but to now see it in Destiny's context has become almost magical and sort of transcendent.
Yeah. I've always been very annoyed by time travel stories that forget that when you go forward, everything else is dead. That, oh, yay, I traveled to another time. It's so neat. But if you're going into the future, everything that you leave is dead. It's gone. It's not there anymore. And there is such a cosmic horror to that idea of being so divorced from everything familiar and not being able to return. Time travel stories have always been fascinating.
Yeah, future sounds great until there's no more ceviche.
Yes, exactly. No more walleye ceviche.
Yeah, last two questions. So first one comes from... it's a conversation, actually, that came up from Scarrow on Twitter, basically. And it was this note about how now we've found the new Mooney as
about
of
how Lodi killed JFK. Yes.
Yes,
very
indeed.
Sad.
Yep.
Very sad.
Of which we will absolutely go into in this next lore section.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Keep going.
No. All good. So yeah, his question basically revolves around the idea that we have the Neomuni as of Lightfall and the Ionians as of Edge of Fate now. And both of these are groups of humans that survived the collapse. And we now know that we have potential links to the past of Destiny. And basically, the question revolves around getting exact dates in Destiny. For the people of the Lost City, the collapse, etc., and potentially the Ionians, there's a lot of historical context and knowledge that's been lost. It's a real deficit of knowledge and record keeping, which is understandable with the context of the collapse. But with Neomuna, it's maybe a little bit less clear. And I think the question revolves around to, is it ever going to be the intention of the team to give exact dates for things in Destiny, or is it the intention to make sure that we can keep that mysterious and keep the sort of idea of when Destiny is as a perpetual layer of mystery and something that is not as important as the moments and the people experiencing those moments?
Yeah, so this ties directly back to that idea of principles, about those facts about the world that just can't change. And one of those facts about Destiny is that Destiny doesn't deal in dates, ever. Ever. Trust me, I've looked, I've tried.
I have
when
to.
we were, yeah, exactly. It's exactly, yeah. And as creators, that can be super frustrating, but also as a creator looking at how we tell the story and what the story values, I get it. I understand why that isn't part of the IP, why that isn't part of the way that these stories are told. It's why when Lodi confesses that he's from the past, he says he's from the space age, because he's picked up too that, they don't use dates here, they use ages. That's the scale at which we measure things nowadays. So that is going to be something that we keep doing. It is, trust me, I know, I wish we could put a hard date on everything, but we just can't.
I will say as well, a little bit of commentary on that too.
Sure.
Me circa 10 years ago, getting into Destiny's lore for the first time, would have found that answer infuriating. Now understanding more of it and seeing the context of the universe totally gets that answer. You know, there's definitely the degree to which it's just less magical if you can sit there and say, in 2894, we had the moment where the Red Legion invaded. And it's just
exactly. It flattens it, right? It makes it super mundane. And I only came to Destiny about 2.5 years ago. I'm still very new to it, and so this was something that was established long before I got here, and it feels like one of those things that's so established it would be wrong to change. And so we channeled a little bit of our frustration through Lodi, going, God damn it, why don't they use publishing dates in books anymore? But it's part of what makes our world special, so I want to honor it.
Yeah, and you know what? I completely get it. It's very different from something like, say, 40K, where the date is literally in the name of the universe, for example, right? Where you have the entire thing defined by the age in which it's created, down to the specific exact date. Destiny is nebulous, you know. Losing everything makes you sit there and think about what is important. But I think that was just... Yeah, I think I wanted to touch on that because it's a very good question, but it's
a great question, and it's a natural question.
Yeah, and I do think that there is a very natural answer to it if you've been playing the game for long enough and you understand that. And it's just, I'm glad that I got to go ahead and ask that. Last thing, very little question, but I think it's kind of a fun one. Some people have explored side content on Kepler, and they found the Turophile quest, aka Sharp Cheddar.
Sharp Cheddar!
Fantastic. For those who do not know, this revolves around a certain Vex. It is a downright weird, but in a complimentary weird, if that makes sense, kind of quest. It's charming, but also it is so quirky and so strange, and it is a little bit out of left field, and it changes and expands our perception of the world. My question is, we've already talked a little bit about side quest content. Is there an objective to go ahead and do more kind of small, weird side content like that expands the world, but does it in a way that you're not necessarily expecting? Because I don't know what the internal feedback loop on things like this is in the studio. From my perspective, I adore that something like this is in the game, even if it isn't something that necessarily branches into the content that is immediately at the core of everything. And that's not to say that it isn't relevant, because it's a Vex who is kind of breaking free of everything to do with Maya, and that in itself is wild. But it's also one of those moments of, is this really as important compared to, say, the main quest? So I guess my real question is, do you have plans to do that going forward? And is that something that was kind of an experiment, or is this something where you actively want to push more of this?
Well, everything that we add to the story is an ingredient in the fridge, right? So that cheese is in our fridge now. Like that idea, like to pull from the puns of that side quest, like that cheese belongs in the fridge. When we introduce an idea, we always try to measure it, not just through how does this connect back to the story, but also how does this connect to what we want to do moving forward? Or like, how does this expand on an area that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet? I love that side quest because it's fun, it's silly, but also because if you like look under the hood, it's presenting a really, really, really big idea in a very subtle and silly way that at first makes you go like, oh, this is just like silly and fun. But then you kind of look at it for a little bit and go,
oh no, the implications of that are enormous and kind of terrifying. And it changes a huge deal about stuff that's been established for like a decade. So yeah,
but it's a fun little head that you'd carry around, haha, and it's kind of cute. Yeah, exactly. I think the answer is yes. We want to explore all of the avenues of storytelling, and telling a good story isn't just telling the main plot. It's also telling the stuff on the side that makes the main plot more important and matter more too. I love that story too, because we get to spend some really nice time with Orin and Lodi as they deal with this very silly situation. I think a good side quest should complement the meal, right?
Yes.
While also giving you a taste of what's to come next on the menu.
Indeed. And it's some of the greatest cheese-related lore this side of Leicester. Absolutely fantastic.
Also some bilingual puns too, which is always fun.
Yes. Yes. Halfway through with Lodi. Oh, God. I need to go ahead and just look through all of the different bits to do with the languages that are involved, but reading through one of the moments where he talks about all the different languages that are involved in his various learnings throughout things, it's impressive and mildly terrifying, because I feel like I now need to know spatterings of everything from Welsh to Polish, and that's great and terrible.
Yeah. I mean, something that's really fun about like that character, I could just talk about Lodi for years. One of those other principles of Destiny is that our characters are hyper competent. Like all of them are extremely competent at something. And so we knew that when we brought this like just a guy into the future, he couldn't be just a guy. Like he should be just a guy on the surface, but we wanted to make sure that he also shared that quality of hyper competency that our other characters do. His area of expertise is radically different from anything else that we've dealt with so far, and it's radically human. His love of humanity is what makes him who he is.
Indeed. I think we've just about run out of time there, but is there any last words you want to go ahead and say on anything to do with Edge of Fate, on any topic we've discussed for, or just generally?
Oh man! Oh, I want to talk about Graviton Lance really fast.
Oh yes, please, yes, absolutely,
yeah.
Go for it.
I want to clear some names. I want to make sure that our sweet lad, his name is totally cleared. Let's talk about dates. I know we just said that there's no dates in Destiny, but for this there kind of is, or at least there's like an order of events that things happened in. That letter that we encounter in the manila envelope that's in the collector's edition, we thought of those papers that are in that envelope as like things from Lodi's desk. that he would have just like gathered either through like his orientation or like saving up the notes he transcribed from William Moffat's speech when he first got there. If I worked at a government institution that knew there was an alien weapon involved in JFK's death, I would take that paper. We wanted to kind of hint that he was like kind of a busybody who's a little bit curious about that stuff. But if you kind of read between the lines, like that paper describing those events of this clearly like non-terrestrial weapon that was potentially used in this assassination happened before he got to the DEO. We can also infer from the fact that there's a blueprint of this of Graviton Lance specifically on Ikora's wall or Dr. Nella Davis's wall. That blueprint happened after they discovered, oh, there's this weird freaky weapon that was used in this one time that we encountered. That Graviton Lance is based off of like we brought that weapon in and we were able to go through and deconstruct it and we're trying to recreate it ourselves. So what the DEO is doing with the Graviton project is trying to kind of like recreate and build on that technology for themselves. The Graviton Lance didn't kill JFK. We don't know what weapon did, and we don't know. Well, it was Lee Harvey Oswald. That's who killed JFK. I'm sorry. So there you go. Clearing some names.
Amazing. Thank you so much. In before Scarrow still calls us both feds at this point, but I mean,
I know,
whatever.
I know. I don't have a badge as I'll keep my secrets.
Yep, absolutely. Allison, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming along and answering all of these questions.
Anytime. And if you ever want to yell about characters, call me up. It's my favorite thing in the whole world. I always love chatting with you.
Unironically, if you did want to sit down and have that long conversation about Lodi, content or not, I'm very happy to go ahead and do it. I understand now. I completely understand.
Dude, yes. Put me in, coach.
Hell yeah. Absolutely. Anyway, thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, you too.